1975, Chapter 231, adequate notice of this regular meeting of the Planning Board of the Township of Franklin has been provided. If everyone would please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Councilman Chase, Mr. LaCourte,
Here.
Ms. MacGyver, Mr. Mettler,
Here.
Mr. Pettit,
Here.
Mr. Howe, Mr.
Here.
Thomas, I know he's on his way, Mr. Potosnak, Mr. Onyaka, Chairman Orsini.
Here. Okay, so before we start, let me just announce that the one hearing that we did have for tonight, which is unsurprisingly Giannato, PLN 07-00005, will be carried to January 21st with no further notification needed. With that, let's tackle the minutes from October the 15th. And if there are no corrections or changes, I'll entertain a motion on that.
Second.
Mr. LaCourte,
Yes.
Mr. Mettler,
Yes.
Mr. Pettit.
Yes.
Mr. Howe. Here. Chairman Orsini.
Yes. And same drill for the regular meeting of November the 5th, 2014.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Mr. LaCourte,
Yes.
Mr. Mettler,
Yes.
Mr. Pettit.
Yes.
Mr. Howe. Chairman Orsini.
Yes. Okay, so a few resolutions here. Canal Walk, PLN 14-00011.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of the resolution PLN 14-00011, Canal Walk.
Second.
Mr. LaCourte,
Yes.
Mr. Mettler,
Yes.
Mr. Pettit,
Yes.
Mr. Howe.
Yes.
Chairman Orsini.
Yes. GDP amendment, that's for what? Summerfield? Didn't have a number or anything like that? Oh, no, it's just a GDP amendment. Okay, so the General Development Plan Amendment for Summerfields. That resolution.
I would move approval of the GDP amendment for Summerfield.
I'll second.
Mr. LaCourte,
Yes.
Mr. Mettler,
Yes.
Mr. Pettit.
Yes.
Mr. Howe. Chairman Orsini.
Yes. And lastly, Builders Pro LLC, PLN 14-00010.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. LaCourte,
Yes.
Mr. Mettler,
Yes.
Mr. Pettit,
Did I vote for that one? Yes.
Mr. Howe.
Yes.
Chairman Orsini.
Yes. Okay, so, just so everybody knows, under the discussion, the item that says minute track will be the last item of the discussion. Other than that, we have the December retainer for our planning board attorney, Marty Murphy. And I think that we've become accustomed to voting on that.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of the voucher for the payment of the fee of Martin Murphy.
Second.
Mr. LaCourte.
Excuse me, is
Yes.
it a voucher or are we
Oh, I'm
reappointing him?
Yeah.
No, the
this
vouchers
is
are
just-
first.
voucher. Can we do all of the vouchers
Yes,
together? for
yes,
the- Okay,
absolutely.
can you amend that, Bob, to doing the voucher not only for the retainer, but for his work on Giannato and Somerset Fire and Rescue?
Oh, absolutely. I would revise my motion to pay all of the vouchers due to Martin Murphy, attorney at law.
Second.
Mr. LaCourte,
Yes.
Mr. Mettler,
Yes.
Mr. Pettit,
Yes.
Mr. Howe.
Yes.
Chairman Orsini.
Yes. That brings us to RFQ.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as our bylaws require us to do, we do fair and open every year. We do advertisement. we received one response from our present planning board attorney, and our bylaws also require you to interview him in public. Typically, it consists of a question or two, the most important being is, does he still wish at this time to be your planning board attorney, even though he submitted it? But you have to actually interview him.
And there are no other candidates?
There are no other
There are no other
candidates.
candidates, okay, so,
I'm certainly interested.
still be
I've
willing to
enjoyed,
serve as
I've
our
enjoyed the
planning board
service.
attorney?
Provided a certificate of sanity?
That's very difficult to obtain.
Does the board have any other questions for the attorney?
I have one. Will your retainer remain the same?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question, especially in this day and age of inflation, for that to be flat, real plus. Are there any other questions? There are not. So, what do we do now?
Just have to do there's a resolution that's in your packet. You have to move and second and pass the resolution.
Huh?
Oh, here it is.
I guess, here it is. Well, I'll go ahead and I'll move the resolution to reappoint Murphy McKeon PC as the law firm representing the planning board of the Township of Franklin.
Okay.
I'll second.
Mr. LaCourte,
Yes.
Mr. Mettler,
Yes.
Mr. Pettit,
Yes.
Mr. Howe,
Yes.
Chairman Orsini.
Yes.
Just don't let me forget to have the two of you sign this before, because they get very upset if we don't have the paperwork in time.
So the next item of business is our revised 2015 board calendar. You should have that in front of you on the dais. You'll notice that we have, probably long overdue to do it, eliminated the work session meeting of each month. We have sufficient time, I think, in most regular meetings to have a work session without, because all we've been doing is canceling them. So with that, we're down to just our 2 meetings per month.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just speak to this very briefly, which is, I think some of you may have overheard me talking to the chairman before, that our next master plan is due March 2016, which means we're probably going to be spending a good part of 2015 working on that. So what I would anticipate, based on our existing application load, that I think we'll have plenty of time to, we're still going to have 2 meetings a month, so we'll have plenty of time to go through the master plan and get that done during the work sessions, which will occur at the regular meetings.
And if we don't, you can always add a meeting, right?
Yeah.
That's, sure.
It's hard to
15
believe.
months to get it done, I think we'll be fine.
It's been close to 10 years since we did the master plan. It seems sort of like yesterday, at least to me.
Yeah.
anyway. So with that, we're going to make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the calendar.
Okay. I also noticed, looking at the resolution we got in our packet with, compared to the one before us, that January, the second meeting has been changed to the 14th, and I assume from the 21st, and I assume that's because of Martin Luther King's birthday, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
So do I have a second to the calendar?
Second.
Mr. LaCourte,
Yes.
Mr. Mettler,
Yes.
Mr. Pettit,
Yes.
Mr. Howe,
Yes.
Chairman Orsini.
Yes. Okay, so the next discussion item is Frank Greek. Does anybody want to give a brief?
Yeah, the attorney's here to give a 30-second, so we can,
So he is.
Hi.
Good evening, Stephen Tripp.
you just want to stick that mic on, up and across.
Good evening, Stephen Tripp from the firm of Walent, Scoben and Spitzer on behalf of the applicant. This is simply a request for an extension of time to file the minor subdivision plat. As you may recall, we obtained, it was preliminary and final major site plan, but the plat was a minor. We had 190 days from the resolution, and that's May 7th. And what happened was we had filed for DEP. We needed a wetlands transition area waiver averaging plan and a general permit for road crossing. They were submitted in March of 2014. DEP deemed them complete in April, but then asked for more information. They wanted revised plans in July. They wanted more information in August. They wanted more information in September. And finally, we got approval in October. Then we were able to finalize our plans, submit them into all the municipal departments. They're all being reviewed now. We just got review comments back. We'll be finalizing it. And under the statute, you can ask for an extension where you've been prevented from proceeding due to delays in getting necessary permits. So that's the basis for the request. We would like a 6-month extension. We expect to file the plat well before that, but just to be on the safe side, we would ask for 6 months. The statute authorizes an extension of time to file that's commensurate with the delay. And as I showed, we had about a 6-month delay before DEP.
Yeah, just to jog everybody's memory, this is the large lot off of Roosevelt Avenue, bordered by Veronica Avenue, with a large, I think this was part of the subdivision, right, where you're subdividing off the wetlands and unbuildable
Well,
portions and,
The original subdivision was 3 lots. We're now reducing it to 2.
okay.
That's why it's a minor.
Mhm.
And we're creating 2 lots, and there's substantial easements, conservation easements on each of the 2 lots.
Okay. So give me a date, like June 1st, July 1st? Going 6 months from today? How do you want to do it?
Well, the 190 days expired in November.
I think you want to get an extension till June 31st?
Yeah.
Right? That's 6 months. That's
Well, that's a day that'll never happen.
June 1st or whatever.
30th.
Yeah, yeah.
June 30th would be fine. We just got the comments back on the plat. We expect to have this filed by the end of January, but
Yeah.
just to be safe, because you never know,
Yeah.
we'll take the full extension.
Any questions from the board? Okay, I'll make a motion for June 30th, 2015 for the extension of time to file the,
Second.
Mr. LaCourte?
Yes.
Mr. Mettler?
Yes.
Mr. Pettit?
Yes.
Mr. Hauk?
Yes.
Chairman Orsini?
yes.
Now, I have one question. Logistically, will you adopt a resolution granting the extension?
Yes.
Because we may, if we're in a position to get the plat filed before your
That
resolution
you
is
can-
adopted,
You can do that.
we can do that because you're aware that the
Yes.
action's been taken?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Just wanted to check because we're really hoping to get
Yep.
this done.
No problem.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay, have a good night. All right, another just discussion item, Vince, I guess? You want to talk, Timothy Kelly?
Yeah,
He's outside.
oh, there he
There
is.
he is.
Come on up, Tim. Just tell him what you want.
I need to get an extension for my subdivision. I'm just waiting on they just have a couple more monuments to set, and I think everything else is pretty much done, just for a setting of monuments,
Do we hear this?
a long time ago.
Yeah,
I don't even remember. Normally I have pretty good memory for this stuff.
yeah.
I-
He's literally, when I'm
like-
saying a couple more monuments, I mean like 6 monuments and
What
he's
was it, a
done.
What's the
minor
subdivision?
stuff?
What is it?
Wilson, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
something
was a
Wilson.
minor subdivision. I think it was 2008 or 9.
It's old.
Oh,
It's old.
wow. How much time do you want?
Well, I'm actually hoping they're going to have it done by next week, but I didn't, I can't guarantee it, so,
How about March 1st?
What are we?
yeah, that's perfect.
Does that work?
Yeah.
It gives you about 3 months or so?
Yeah,
2
yeah, I
months?
mean, I know they have,
Because I don't want you to have to come back again. I mean, this is a
Yeah.
very simple issue.
yeah, they have the pins, they just have to put the, because I guess it's wetland markers, they still have to set, so they have to put the 4x4.
Could it be weather?
There's like a 4x4 post with the marker thing, that's the only thing that's left to be
Still
set.
before the
So
ground
March
freezes.
should be fine.
Okay,
Those are the DEP monuments you're talking about?
You don't want to-
Conservation easement?
Yeah, just the conservation easement monuments. I think the other monuments are set, and so
better than
that's it.
10th than never, right?
Gotcha.
Okay, I'll make a motion to extend to March 1st of
I'll
2000.
second.
Mr. LaCourte?
Yes.
Mr. Mettler?
Yes.
Mr. Pettit?
Yes.
Mr. Hauk?
Yes.
Chairman Orsini?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
thanks, have a great night. Okay, we have now a minute track. Justin. Going high tech.
I have to sign a date there. I don't forget it.
So that projector is just going to take a second to turn on. For those members of the board who don't know me, my name is Justin Hyman. I'm the IT director here for the township. We are in the process, or over the last few months, as you may be aware, have converted over to a agenda automation / paperless agenda system, similar to what the Township Council has done about 2 years ago. We converted this over for the Township Council. It's been relatively successful there in providing paperless agendas to both the public and the council members themselves. As such, we've begun to roll this out to both this board and the zoning board. The purpose of this is a couple-fold. One is to save some money for the township overall in shuffling less paper, be a little bit more green in doing so, and also streamline a little bit of the back-end process that most of you don't necessarily see, but that staff are participating in. What I want to do today is just show you guys how you'll retrieve your agendas going forward, and answer any questions you may have. It's generally a very straightforward process, so hopefully this won't take very long, and then I'll answer any questions that you may have. So generally speaking, as soon as the agenda is ready, what will happen is you'll receive an email on whatever email address you've provided to Mr. Healy, Mr. Dominic, and Christine Woodbury. They've provided that to us already, so it's already in the system. You will see, I don't know what happened here. Maybe not. Oh, that's...
Just now?
I literally think the bulb just burned.
Yeah, it was on before, it looked fine.
That's what happens with IT, you know?
Technology.
The software is fine, it's the hardware that's the problem.
Yeah, right.
Bring back the printing press.
Yellow pad and a paper, and a pencil.
Give another one in the office?
Even if you had one, you
You got a
go
ladder to
change
get up
it.
there?
Do you guys have other business, or is it?
We do have one other thing.
You want to do one other thing? I'll run back to my office, get another projector, and I'll...
Sure.
Then I'll fire it off that way.
Okay.
We'll go to plan B.
Sounds good.
Sorry.
We'll do this taped and on the record then, because we have to stay in session for this, so
Yeah,
it doesn't make a difference.
no.
It's no big
So
deal.
we'll do the work sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Hamilton Street.
You know, it's getting serious when a map is coming out.
And wait a minute, it's on paper, I'm not gonna look at that. Get the computer quick.
Jim refuses to look at paper anymore.
No, I'm a fan of yellow pads and wooden pencils. They always worked, never failed. Took a little longer, but it didn't fail.
So
I
true.
had an eraser too.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here because it's far easier to discuss this rather than looking down the big, long table every single time. What this is in your packet, you have a memorandum from the Hamilton Street Advisory Committee. Vince and I have been working with this committee for the last 6 months or so. This committee was formed around that time, again, about 6 months ago. Its purpose is to come up with ways to try to revitalize the Hamilton Street corridor. The advisory board is made up of business owners, residents, property owners. There's an at-large member. Those are the voting members. And then there also is a good amount of representation from the township as non-voting members. There are 3 members of council, the mayor, and I think kind of the key players in terms of township staff, township manager, Vince and myself. Vince acts as the executive director. Engineering, DPW, police, et cetera, are all involved in this effort. One of the first things that we did was to identify, we did what's called a SWOT analysis, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, to identify some issues that, threats and weaknesses, things that were thwarting the revitalization of the Hamilton Street area, and also to identify things that, opportunities that we could, and strengths that we could build upon. One of the, just to give you an idea of the different issues that they have identified and that we continue to work with them on are issues such as safety, crime, the perception thereof. That's a major thing that we're continuing to work on. The need to spur revitalization through private investment, and that's the purpose of this discussion tonight, which is the zoning is a key part of that. Parking, traffic, assessment levels, lack of community space, the streetscape, those are all things that we're working on as issues. As far as opportunities and things to build upon, its general location in the township, its proximity to New Brunswick, to Rutgers University, Robert Wood Johnson, St. Peter's. These are all things that we can build upon and to help encourage the revitalization. Again, as I said, the desire and the need to spur revitalization through private investment was one of the high priority issues that was identified, with zoning being one of the main things that can be used, that could, first of all, thwart potential revitalization, but they could also be amended to help encourage private developers to come in and do developments that would help the area. Again, so that was the background to the memo. Vince and I worked with the Hamilton Street group as a whole. They also formed a zoning subcommittee. That subcommittee issued a recommendation to the larger group. That larger group endorsed those recommendations, and those are in this memo that are provided to you. So I'm going to go over very briefly the recommendations that are in here. In terms of next steps, if the planning board is, at the end of the day, if we're moving forward with these recommendations, we would need to do a master plan amendment related to that, to the area, and then obviously there would have to be an ordinance prepared to put it into effect. The first thing, one of the things we looked at was the depth of the district. There was a perception that the district wasn't deep enough to allow development. Bottom line is basically the result of our analysis is that the depth of the district, it goes back 200 feet, is fine. It just so happens that a lot of the developments that we have had have only gone back 100 feet. They haven't used the full depth of the district. A lot of the developments that have been, some of the larger developments, such as Independence Crossing, that was a 200-foot depth. Clearly, that's a relatively large building, good amount of parking. So clearly, the 200 feet depth is sufficient. There's also practical limitations to how far the district can go back, mostly because a lot of the side streets are that parallel, so you can't even go back more if we wanted to. One of the other issues that we looked at was the alignment of the district, the fact that the district is a mile long in length. Basically, the vision for Hamilton Street is as a pedestrian-friendly, mixed-use, walkable, Main Street type environment. Not too many main streets are a mile long. So that's actually a problem. Typically, you have an area like this, you'd want to break it up into 2 or 3 smaller nodes where you'd have higher concentration of retail activity with some mixed use, perhaps higher density residential to support that. Problem is with Hamilton Street is it's such a fine mixture of retail and commercial throughout the whole length. We'd basically be choosing losers and winners in terms of what areas are included and what are not. So the Hamilton Street, the recommendation from the committee was basically to leave the zone as it is and use other methods to try to encourage development that would help the area. There are some recommendations in terms of the area that's within the Hamilton Street zone. Basically, the area, the corridor along Hamilton Street itself is not recommended to change. There are some areas along Franklin Boulevard which adjoin Hamilton Street and are within the Special Improvement District. And what the Special Improvement District is basically, Vince, do you want to explain what the Special Improvement District does?
What the Special Improvement District does is it allows us, the township, to have a special assessment, actually it's like a tax. And what the tax, we didn't do it this year, 2 years ago, it was at, for every $100,000, it was $90, is what the tax was. And that can be used to fund a budget, and the budget is used to make improvements, to buy things, et cetera. It also grants certain statutory abilities to do some other things, to get some grant funds and some other abilities. But basically, it's a special area that you can tax in a different manner, and it gives you the ability to apply and do other things.
And the assessment that's collected can only go back to improvements and programs to help that area that
Yes.
is the subject of the special assessment. So what this map is showing is this is the red outline is the zoning districts, and the blue is the area that's within the Hamilton Street Special Improvement District. One of the thoughts was, do they have to align? You know, the Hamilton Street Business Zone is here, and then there's some areas along Franklin Boulevard that are within the Special Improvement District, but not in the Hamilton Street zone. Basically, the conclusion was they don't really have to align. There are some areas, office professional over in here, general business over in here, that where the zoning functions appropriately, but they are part of the corridor as a whole, so they should stay within the Special Improvement District.
Who gets the tax? Who's taxed?
The commercial properties. Residential properties are not
Existing
taxed.
commercial
Yes.
and existing residential?
The residential they don't pay. It's just a
So it's the
business.
commercial. All the
Yes,
commercial that in that district
yes,
can be or are?
they are,
Can be,
Wait, no, are they taxed now?
yes.
this year they were not.
No, but it's on the books. They could have been.
Yes,
Okay.
we have the ability to.
Understand.
And they basically were not because essentially there wasn't a need to tax it.
There was a need, and we had money left over from the previous year when they were in flux, so we used that money for
Could
this
that be
year.
used to create parking, if we could find an area to park it?
Yes.
Could be, yes, absolutely.
That seems to be a big problem
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay.
So in terms of the zoning, some of the recommendations, one is to include within the HBD zone, the Quick Mart property, and then there's an office building behind it to include those in the HBD zones. They are currently within the office professional. Those existing uses would continue to be permitted uses, but by including it in the HBD zone, it would allow those areas to be redeveloped in accordance with the rest of the Hamilton Street area. Similarly, there's a recommendation on the east side of Franklin Boulevard, south of Hamilton Street. There's a car wash and a few other properties where they're currently in the GB zone. Similarly recommended to go into the HBD zone to encourage those properties as well to be developed in accordance with the HBD zone. One of the reasons as well is because they join the mixed-use zone within the redevelopment area, so it basically connect and combine those areas with similar development. And then lastly, there is a property located off of Matilda. It is a non-conforming industrial/commercial property within the R7 zone. The recommendation is to include it in the HBD zone so that if the Johns Plaza area was ever redeveloped, there's a large undeveloped portion back in here, that site could be incorporated into that larger development and frankly put to better, more attractive use. It's basically a glorified junkyard, I believe, in a residential zone. So certainly if it was included in some type of, redevelopment of Johns Plaza, that'd be a better use. And in terms of the Special Improvement District, the recommendation is to eliminate this area which is residentially used anyway, so the residential property is not getting taxed anyway, and they're also within the redevelopment area. So the recommendation is to remove that, but to include the St. Peter's and Paul site. They would not be taxed because they're not a commercial use, but that would allow them to be involved and on the, I think it's important, they're kind of a gateway location into the district, and it would allow them to be involved in this whole planning process for Hamilton Street. In terms of and this is one of the main things that they are trying to accomplish again, and to incentivize development in the area. We looked at the intensity and density of development. The current building height limitation is 2.5 stories and 40 feet. We have had, and this board has seen a number of applications over the years, 4 to be exact, where you've granted variances to go up to 3, keeping the 40-foot. A few of those are moving forward. What they basically note here that permitting increased building height can act as a significant incentive to redevelopment. However, with a taller building, more commercial, more residential, obviously you need a larger site to accommodate the increased parking needs. But then also the larger site also, acts as an incentive. One of the main things that the Hamilton Street Group would like to have happen is for developers to come in and actually take up larger areas of property and actually put them to better use. So the recommendation is to keep the base building height of 2.5 stories and 40 feet. Keep that in the zone, but allow to go up to 3 stories. Keep the minimum lot area, which is 10,000 square feet, but allow them to go up to 3 stories if the units contain no more than 2 bedrooms. I think there's a number of reasons for that. One of them being, again, building on the proximity to Rutgers, encouraging student housing, graduate student housing, young professionals. It would bring people to the area. Obviously, it's going to help the businesses. And then they recommend that in certain circumstances to allow an increase to go up to 4 stories, keeping that same 2-bedroom limitation, but you'd have to be a much bigger site. You'd have to be at 40,000 square feet, so basically it's 4 times the size, just less than an acre. And you'd have to go the full depth of the zone. You'd have to go 200 feet back in order to get to 4 stories. Any comments or questions about that recommendation?
What point, I don't remember, I should, but I don't remember. There's a point where we have to put elevators in the system. What point is that?
I think maybe once they get to 3, I believe.
No, it's in the code, but I don't remember.
Yeah.
It's 3.
It's commensurate.
No, it's 3.
Cost of the building.
Yes.
It was 4, it went down to
It's not
3.
easy, it's not so easy to jump from 3 to 4.
Yeah.
Or from 2 to 3, because that's a substantial cost.
Yeah, no, and in fact, some of the developers,
$20,000 a stop.
it is a problem, and some of the
That's
developers have
30.
experienced that, as Vince just said.
Yeah.
It was 4, it went to 3, so some of the very developments that this board has approved have run into that issue.
Just
They didn't
the elevator
believe
alone,
they
it
needed,
was like 30 grand.
yeah, they didn't believe they needed to put elevators in, and then they found out after the fact that they did.
So,
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying, when you're
Yeah.
thinking about
Mhm.
story heights and cost and attracting development.
Yep.
You gotta plug those numbers in. So,
Yep.
Yeah, and in fact, what we're seeing is a couple of the buildings that did 3, there's a break-even point of whether it's 18 units or 20 units and the ones that we approved at 10 or 12 units, doing the 3 floors doesn't work for them.
No, it can't.
It doesn't work because you can't,
Amazing how
right.
much it costs, just
Yep.
for the elevator.
Yep.
It used to be, back in the old days, $20,000. So if you, first floor, second floor, third floor, that's
Yep.
60 grand just for the elevator.
Yep.
Now it's up. I mean, it's up right in the 30s or 40s even now, because there's new fire regulations. So, I mean, just bringing it up as an issue, not an issue.
Yeah,
It's a point to look at.
yeah,
when
we're
you're thinking about it.
we're aware of
It's not
that.
simple.
Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Metler?
Where we have allowed or have 4-story units in the redevelopment area, those buildings have within them parking, by and large. I think all of them do. The ones on Berry Street have parking.
Yes, they all have parking either below ground or on the
Ground
first floor with the development above.
Yeah, and I realize that those buildings are somewhat different because they do contain some affordable housing and thus have been able to get some subsidies that people on Hamilton Street might not be eligible for. But would it be a reasonable thing where you're allowing 4 stories to make as part of the requirement that they have on some on-site parking?
Well, we'll get to that, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. There are some
Okay.
recommendations for parking.
Okay.
And they get into the, also has the theme of incentivizing certain developments that we'd like to encourage.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions on that issue? Okay. Permitted uses, bottom line is overall, the permitted uses are consistent with the Main Street character of the area. There are some recommendations. One is to eliminate standalone townhouse apartments, and independent senior living. So basically, we would to encourage and we would require, if you're going to do apartments, it would have to be in the form of mixed use, where you'd have commercial on the first floor, residential above, or commercial on the first floor and office above, but not to allow just standalone apartment buildings, which is currently permitted in the HBD zone up to 19 units to the acre. The other recommendation is to eliminate 1 and 2 family dwellings as permitted uses. There are some existing, kind of scattered throughout the zone, single-family and two-family homes. Part of the issue is that we basically want to encourage those homes to be purchased. Obviously, it would be at the, they would have to negotiate with a developer, and they would have to get whatever the market would dictate, but to have those properties, those buildings, or those homes purchased, and to have mixed-use development occur along Hamilton Street. The next recommendation is to eliminate, there's a contractor design build operation. It's basically like a contractor's yard. The thought was that that's not an appropriate use along Hamilton Street, so the recommendation would be for that to come out. Lastly, in terms of affordable housing, we did have a discussion with the Hamilton Street group. They basically felt that 2 main things. Number one, they didn't feel that they were really the appropriate group to make those recommendations, that really is something that should be discussed by the planning board and council. And I think that was the appropriate position for them to take. They did express some concerns, though, one being the fact that the redevelopment area and the Hamilton Street area have seen a large proportion of the township's affordable housing. So they wanted to make sure the council and the planning board were aware of that. And they were also concerned about if affordable housing was required, obviously the market rate development subsidizes the affordables. So they were afraid that if affordable housing was a requirement, that would be a significant disincentive for developers to come in. I agree with, I think, as well, I think that's an important consideration.
Yeah, especially because we're going to make them do the mixed use, and most of the developers, their money is coming from the housing and not from the commercial. So the Hamilton Street felt that it would be an extreme disincentive if they would have to further subsidize not only through the commercial, but also the affordable housing with the apartments. So.
But they did make one comment, which is that that it may be appropriate if there are larger scale developments, and for example, 50 units or more, that perhaps that might be, once you get to a larger scale, obviously you have a larger number of market rate units to subsidize, perhaps that might be a situation where 15 or 20% of the units could be affordable, but clearly anything less than that, you'd basically, it'd be a huge disincentive.
Well, here's my question, though. You're going to build those, they're going to count in your affordable housing obligations, so you're going to have to build it somewhere. Where are you going to build it?
Well,
Are these developers going to contribute to an affordable housing fund?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they'd have to pay the 1%. Absolutely.
Because, we've seen RPM and Berry Street and all these guys do mixed use with affordable housing. Now, I know they got subsidies and they were sort of maybe a special case in a sense, right?
Well,
but they had the ground floor commercial, and then they had the affordable, in fact, a lot.
Yeah, two things to that. One, the Leewoods and RPMs of the world, they basically are affordable housing developers. They don't, basically all their funding is through governmental sources, or governmental programs.
So in this case, you guys are sort of talking about a free market.
Yes.
It's a free market, what you would call an
Who would
inclusionary development, like a Summerfields, Cedar Manor, Avalon Somerset, where they are predominantly market rate units with a small percentage, 15 or 20% of affordable. But also those developments, consistent with what we're talking about here, Summerfields is 900 units. Avalon is a similar, is not anywhere close to that, but they're much larger
And
developments.
RPM and Leewood are heavily subsidized through the state funding. the way that they'd have to be subsidized is the rates would have to be higher, the density would have to be higher in that street, because we wouldn't be looking at the subsidies for that.
But there's nothing to say, though, that you might get cases like that again, or you'd get some hybrid thereof. The only thing I would ask is that, I don't know where the unit, I'd like to know or have some data on what the break-even point is. For example, in your last bullet point there on page 9, you say if affordable housing is required, it should only be required of larger-scale developments containing 50 or more dwelling units. What's to say it should be 50 and not 40 or not 60?
I can look at
I'd
that.
like to know, because, everything we don't build where it's built has got to be built somewhere else or somehow accounted for. So even if they pay us, which is wonderful, still got to go somewhere.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of not, rather make it an exception rather than a rule. You know what I mean?
Yep. Now, we can certainly look at, that 50 was an approximation, a professional judgment of what but we can do some more research on what that is. The one other thing.
It's possible you could work with anybody. What I'd rather not see is say, oh, you don't need to do that. Of course, any developer's going to love that, right?
Yep.
And I know that's the point. You're trying to encourage it. But the thing is, if you make them do something, you can always give them an exception to it. But if you don't make them do something, then you can't require them to do something.
Yep.
So I'd rather work in that direction, you know what I mean?
The one thing to keep in mind, though, is that I think, the growth share requirements or methodology was overthrown by the courts. And what that means is, when we were doing our last COA plan, we were always conscious of, that is a 100-unit development, one for every 6. Our COA obligation just went up by, whatever 100 divided by 6 is. So every single last unit was upping, market rate unit was upping our COA obligation. That's not the case anymore. First of all, there is no obligation, there is no methodology right now. But in all likelihood, or at least what the court has told COA to do, is basically go back, do the round 2 rules, which is they just assign us a number. So if we have no development or we have a whole bunch of development, our number is going to be some number that they give us based on their methodology. So if
You mean
if 50 units happen in some particular development or 100, in all likelihood, that's not going to affect our COA obligation. That seems to be the way that it may be heading.
Yeah, not to
hedge
turn
that
this
comment
into a
more.
co-discussion,
Yep.
it just seems to me that the only thing that comes out of any of this round robin of rules and litigation is, more litigation. And I just, as we've had discussions before, right, that COA is like white noise to me. I never pay attention to any of this thing. It's like the weather, it's going to change. So, the only thing that enriches a present company accepted is the legal profession.
Are there any tracks out there now that'll handle a 50-unit development?
Sure.
Absolutely.
We're going to have to assemble
Well,
single-family.
it's a mixture. It's a mixture. There are
Today, right now, is there a track that can handle?
there are a few larger sites. First of all, there are some sites that are developed that could be redeveloped. There's again
Well, yeah,
John's
totally.
Plaza. There's the North
Yeah,
Shopping
of course.
Center.
But I'm saying of
There's-
existing sites that are available.
There is, I forget the name of the street. I think it's generally opposite John's Plaza. That I think it's about an acre and a half of land.
Okay, so you could-
Basically, it's a single-family house, but it has.
And there are several developers who are under contract or seeking to get under contract for larger assembly pieces. Because the properties are going, as Tim Kelly will tell you,
And what
very
are these
cheaply.
developers what premise are these developers coming in now under? That this is going to change for them, or?
No.
No, they're
As
doing
of-
it the way it is today.
Right.
If they're looking to buy land and doing it right.
Well, if somebody wants to come in
Try to buy
today,
it today, assemble it today, okay.
yes.
But they also, I will, to be fair to them, they also know, most of the ones have come in and talked to us, that the township is looking at
Okay.
the possibility of changing it,
But they-
So
Where-
that-
but they know it.
Where's the contractor yard?
I'm sorry?
Where's the contractor yard you keep talking about?
there isn't one. It's
No, no,
just a
no, this is-
permitted use.
No. He's
You're
talking
talking
about.
about the one behind John's?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
back-
Oh,
here.
well, that's been there for instance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the 49 years I've lived here, that's been there. Okay. I didn't know what you meant, contractor yard. That's a junkyard.
I was trying
Well,
to
it
be,
used to
I
be
was
construction.
I was trying to be nice.
No, it was bulldozers, and it used to.
Yes.
It was a contractor that actually owned it.
Yep.
And kept his equipment there.
So,
Well, we'll zone that out. I mean, that's a good idea so that, whenever it comes up, it's not.
it would allow somebody to buy that and incorporate it into their larger redevelopment. In terms of the bulk requirements, there's, setbacks, coverages, et cetera. Basically, there aren't too many recommendations. They basically work. The one recommendation is that the building coverage be changed from 40% to 50%. That's just to allow some more flexibility in case, a developer is able to build what they want to build, provide the parking that is required, and not have the 40% limitation unnecessarily,
30 to 80%
restrict what they want to do. But the recommendation is to keep the 85% impervious coverage limitation in place. Parking,
That's fine, because I think the only pushback you'd get is if you raised impervious. I don't think
Right.
lot coverage
Well,
is gonna.
yeah, and I'll get to parking in a second, but, if they provide the parking that is required, then why have the amount of building coverage limit them?
Right.
And if they have the parking, and if they can go up to 42% or something, who cares? Okay, so recommendations for parking. Right now, as you know, the parking requirements in the Hamilton Street Business District are relatively, are unique and flexible. There's a lower parking requirement for commercial. There's an allowance for the non-residential parking to be provided either on-site, off-site, or via an in-lieu payment, whereas the residential needs to be provided on-site. There is some, obviously, as you know, free public parking provided in the form of on-street parking, but unlike many other main streets, and as Mr. Pettit was talking to before, there are no large public, there's actually none, no public parking lots to accommodate. So we, while it makes sense to have some flexibility, we can only go so far. So the recommendations are twofold. One is to clarify that the parking requirements in the HBD zone, that parking requirements for residential and ADA must be provided on site. That's the way we've been enforcing it. We need to make that more clear. But the one change is to change the parking for one-bedroom units. And the recommendation is to have a low, right now RESIS requires, which is the Residential Site Improvement Standards, recommends 1.8 spaces per one-bedroom unit, whereas a two-bedroom is 2, and I think a three-bedroom is 2.1. So basically, really, the parking requirement for a one-bedroom is the same as a two-bedroom.
Hey, you have a husband and wife, and they're both driving, and they need a car.
Well,
That's not absurd.
we'll get to that, and if the board has comments, we'll discuss it. The recommendation is to allow a lower ratio of 1 or 1.2.5, somewhere in that range, with the additional, the remainder between 1 and 1.8 to be provided using the flexibility that's in the ordinance. So let's say if you provide, if the parking requirement is we're saying there's 1.0 per one bedroom, then the 0.8 that they're short per unit, they could either provide off-site or via the in lieu, which is allowed to the commercial uses. Does that
Yeah, the only thing
understand
about all
the
this.
understand the concept?
Well-
But whether you believe it works or not, do you understand the concept?
Yeah, no, I understand the
Okay.
We
concept.
understand the concept, we're letting people build all over that place, and nobody's built any parking. That's our problem,
Yeah,
because we take money in lieu. Well, when are we gonna do something?
yeah.
Because it's getting to be a mess down there.
Why doesn't the
Well,
township
no,
buy a lot?
I don't know if it is a mess down there.
I don't agree with it, it's a mess. I mean, if you go down there at any time and did a study, there's maybe
Anytime, be careful what
20,
you say.
be
I think there's some pockets. but you-
90% of the time, besides a few pockets, there's
Well,
most of the
don't throw
parking
away the
spaces
few
aren't
pockets,
used.
Okay, because it's all, you're trying to revitalize Hamilton Street, even if it's 5,280 feet long. You gotta look at the whole thing, including the pockets. It doesn't work.
In a typical setting like we have on that street,
Well, we're not gonna
you,
argue tonight, I just-
no, I'm just pointing
Well,
out, a
it's-
typical setting on that street, just like in New Brunswick, doesn't have any parking requirement. So
What does that mean?
Well, what I'm
They have lots, they have
what I'm pointing out is that,
Yeah, they got plenty of parking in the Brunswick. You gotta go in the deck and pay up through the nose.
Well, see, that's
Okay,
what
I
we
don't-
should
I
do.
think,
We should
well,
build a
I
lot.
think
and, you
we
know,
should get into
collect.
it, because if
Well,
the
no,
planning
well,
board,
No, you're just presenting, we're gonna get into this when we start doing it, right?
Yeah,
We're not
we-
doing this tonight. You're just highlighting a few,
well,
we're just
but
making
what we,
comments.
what we do, well, the next step.
Perfectly willing to have our minds changed.
Yes, but what we do want to have a sense of is if there are some themes in here that the planning board is
I think
opposed to, then obviously we shouldn't, then we have to evaluate that.
you'd have to prove to me that a one-bedroom apartment can only have one parking place. That's-
all right, that's fair.
You have to show me.
That's,
because
I think we can do that. I think,
Most guys, well,
Yeah.
unless they're single people, you know.
well, there's two things going on. Two things I think we need to consider. One is, I think it's a chicken and egg thing. I mean, right now, yeah, there's not a lot of money in the fund because we haven't collected a lot of money.
I understand.
Well, we're not going to collect a lot of money unless we allow the developments to occur that are going to pay into the fund.
But in the
If we
meantime-
don't allow
in the
people to
meantime, you
use
have to
this, we're
deal
never
with
going to
the-
collect any.
Let's say you go with your one parking place. In the meantime, you're allowing, you don't collect, you're collecting money. You're allowing no space or one space per apartment.
Mhm.
And what are you doing with the cars in the meantime?
No, see, this is what you gotta do really, Mark, if you wanna make it work, is I understand your point about
Yeah, I
collecting the money.
understand what
You
you're
gotta bond for the lot, you gotta build the lot, and then you gotta pay for the lot with the money you collect. Because by the time you collect enough money to actually build a lot, there'll be a huge problem, just like Jim said.
I
Well,
think to some degree. we
let
have
me
to-
speak it. I think what you want us to show you is we need to give you some information more to the point that the type of things that we're trying to encourage on the street, the 1 and 2 bedroom units above this, don't typically, a great percentage of them do not have 2 parking spaces. In fact, a great percentage of them don't have any parking. We have a developer who's coming in right now, is looking at 60 units that's built in New Brunswick and a couple other places, and 75 to 80% of the units, because of how they're designed, don't have any cars. So I think we need to give you some of that information so that you understand, because you're right, Jim, if you look at it normally, a 2-bedroom apartment, husband and wife,
Well,
2
bedroom.
cars,
We're going to-
1 bedroom.
Yeah, yeah.
That's typical. I think what
Years
we're.
ago it wasn't, but now it
Right.
is.
I
They
think
all have
we
two
need to give you more information so you feel more comfortable with and we had a lot of these conversations that you weren't privy to. You need to have more, and that's what we're trying to get from you tonight. What you feel comfortable, what you don't, we need to give you more information, and then you're going to decide whatever you're going to decide.
Yeah.
I think one of the
Park-
issues,
Parking needs to be looked at really
Okay.
heavily.
yes,
Like,
that's,
just for
that's,
example-
the two issues go together. I mean,
Yeah.
intensity of development and parking. I think part of the issue too is, I think there are widely diverging opinions on the parking situation on Hamilton Street. I mean, frankly,
That's fine.
Most of
Do a study and come up with the numbers and we buy into it, that's all.
It also depends on the type of a development. For example, if like, North Brunswick is doing the transit village right off
Yeah.
of Route 1 at the old J&J side. So, I mean, if you design development for people to like get on mass transit, then the people who are gonna buy that development are gonna use mass transit because there won't be in a place to park, right?
Right.
So it really depends upon the type of development, but I mean, I agree with Jim, it'd be good to see the data. I'm quite certain the data will say that there's less requirement parking for 1 bedroom than there is for 2 or 3, but exactly what the
Yeah,
numbers
we
are.
we can do that, and I think the other thing too, that we're going to investigate is, there is a designation called an area in need of rehabilitation, which is under the redevelopment law, but it's not a redevelopment zone. There's no eminent domain involved whatsoever, but it does provide some additional tools, some additional ability to really, pinpoint exactly what the nature of development and for the board to impose and the township to impose much stricter requirements in terms of the types of developments and the types of units that occur. So we may be able to use that area in need of rehabilitation to, really maybe come up with very strict circumstances when this lower, Mike, what I was just saying is, we're going to investigate whether the area could be, or whether it should be designated an area in need of rehabilitation. That's under the redevelopment law. It's not a redevelopment area, it does not involve eminent domain whatsoever, but it does provide some more teeth and some more ability for the township to impose more strict requirements on types of units, design, et cetera. We may be able to use that to, perhaps there's some certain circumstances, certain types of units, certain types of populations, if it's student housing, et cetera, where this lower parking requirement would apply. Because I think we all agree, we don't want to necessarily have, a bunch of married couples with 2 cars and then only having 1 space. I think we want to allow, a lower parking requirement when the actual development is going to result in a lower parking demand.
That's fine.
So we'll look into all those things we just talked about.
Okay.
Excuse me, before you leave this, that thing you're talking about, the area of need development, is the group, the Hamilton Street group, been tuned into that too?
No, that issue, that idea popped up after we discussed
okay.
this.
No, I just was curious.
Well, the group is aware of the concept. We've discussed the concept, but we didn't discuss the concept in conjunction with this report.
Okay.
Okay, real quick, lastly, design standards, there are very detailed design standards. There's some recommendations in here to address, to have more illustrate, basically it's all text. So you have to be either a planner or an architect to really understand what it says, some more illustrations and diagrams to illustrate what these concepts mean. And that's very important to developers. They want to know what are you talking about here? So that's a recommendation. And then also to have some standards for site design layout. A lot of the design standards are all signage,
Lighting standards.
architectural, what have you, but it's, where should the parking be? Where should the building be? How much of the cover, not placing parking lots at the corners, things like that. And then lastly, signage. The recommendation is to eliminate, the signage is unique to Hamilton Street. There's actually a good amount of flexibility and signage that's permitted in Hamilton Street that's not permitted elsewhere, in acknowledgement of the fact that it's a Main Street area. Awning signage, there's different requirements for building signage that's, again, the fact that the buildings are up on the street and the signage corresponds to that. There is very few businesses along the corridor that have freestanding signs. Since the buildings are up on the street, and since you're allowed to have all this building-mounted signage and awning signage, the recommendation is to prohibit freestanding signs. And then there's a technical thing that needs to be changed with regard to the awnings, signage standards for awnings.
No, Mark, right now, the standards are, the parking should be in the back, right? Not in the front?
See, that's what I'm saying. I don't think there's anything, the setback is a maximum setback. The building has to be up on the front, but, which basically tells you, well, that just ultimately means the parking's going to be in the back.
Yeah.
But I think there needs to be some more clarity in terms of maybe some diagrams explaining, put the parking in the back, don't put the parking at the corner, maybe have limitations on the amount of the frontage that can be occupied by parking, or if the parking is up on the street,
If you really wanted a
screen it
Main
in some way.
Street type design, like if you look at like Somerville, for example, right? There's no parking in the front. It's a facades, and all the parking is in lots in the back off of side streets. You don't want a situation where you have a nice facade of Main Street type of thing with signs hanging over and it's all nice, and then you go through a parking lot and there's a building way set back, like John's, for example. So, yeah, anything we can do to get, a consistent parking in the back, municipal lots, I mean, let's
So you
come
want to create a
into the
facade like down
21st
the
century.
street.
Huh? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I understand. It makes sense.
Because, you don't want to be walking down, you totally lose the effect that you're going for if you're walking down the street and you've got all this sort of like, you're in Somerville, right? You kind of have a continuous row. You don't want to all of a sudden be walking through a parking lot.
Yeah, and I think
That's exactly what these recommendations are speaking to.
yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah.
So the next steps, I think we have two different avenues. One is to come back and discuss these in more detail, or put these in the form of a draft master plan amendment and draft ordinance, and during that process, we can continue to talk about some of these details in terms of parking, et cetera.
Yeah, I would do that, the latter thing you said, and draft it like it's going to be there, with all the specifics, and then we'll have another whack at it.
Okay,
Kick it around.
sounds good.
So, and whatever backup data you have, submit it.
Yep.
with your draft.
We'll look at, particularly the parking, we'll look into
Parking.
that and address those issues the board talked about. Sorry we took so long, but it was
That was good.
ongoing, important issue.
That's what happens when you're IT and your bulb burns out. 50-cent bulb, probably.
That's fine.
Hey, what was it, Apollo
Really?
13? Apollo 13 was a $2 transfer valve that didn't work.
You guys want to come down this way, you could.
This is crazy.
Barely had a quorum tonight.
Malls.
Barely have a quorum.
I know.
They're all out
Just have a
shopping.
quorum. We have five.
That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Just because they-
You looked at the agenda and said,
Because I am on. I'm sorry. Bullshit. Get it from the top, from the bottom, I don't know which way. Come and try to tell, I don't have any TV shows in my house, I keep throwing things at it. Every time my friend in Washington gets up to speak, I throw another brick. Not really. You have to dock the clothes. Can't do anything,
All right, we're back.
all right.
Can't do anything.
Okay, so as I said, we are moving towards a paperless agenda system for all those reasons that I kind of stated. What's important to you as a board is how to get your agendas now. Large format documents will still come to you in the same fashion that they always have. We all kind of recognize that trying to read a set of plans on a computer monitor is rather difficult. So your large format documents that you would have normally gotten in paper will still go in paper, I guess, via your mailboxes, however you've normally gotten them. That won't change. What will change is that as soon as the rest of the agenda is ready, you'll receive an email that looks very similar to this one. It'll come from Christine Woodbury, who prepares your agendas, and it'll just simply state that the agenda is ready for viewing. This will be instantaneous. The minute that Christine finalizes that agenda and Mark is ready for it to be distributed, it will be distributed and in your inboxes that moment. There are two options here. One will be to simply download it, and that will download it in a PDF format that is readable on any device that you choose to read it on. That will also allow you for offline viewing. So if you choose to begin to view these documents on a laptop or a mobile device of some sort, and you want to bring that with you to the meetings, Wi-Fi in this room is equipped for that. That's how council does it now. They all do it on via their iPads. And so you can choose to do that via this link. I encourage everybody, if you're going to do it, and that's going to be your only source of the agenda, to please do it through the PDF, because if for some reason the Wi-Fi does go out, even if I or a member of my staff responds and fixes it, you'll be without it during the time that it takes us to fix it. That being said, I'm going to show you this other piece, which is our web agenda. The other thing that happens, just so for your own knowledge, once the agenda is published, it will also be available to the public via the web. And again, that's kind of an instantaneous thing, so it gets out to the public much faster as well. This is our meeting portal. This is hosted off-site. This is not hosted here at the Township. You will have to log in to retrieve the board agenda. The board agenda is a different version of the agenda in the public, same as it would be if it were a paper document. You know, the executive session minutes and executive session proceedings obviously don't go to the public. They do go to you, and that's why you have to log in to make sure you are really a board member.
So basically, we'd get everything in this electronic format except plans. In other words, all the staff reports that are associated with each application.
Well,
Work session.
the plans will be available,
Yes,
But-
they will be there.
but you'll get hard copies of those
Right,
because,
you
I
might
mean,
want to spread up.
right, you-
Yeah, right. But the
unless
staff
you have a large
reports,
monitor, you
could
want
read on
to,
your computer, they'll be available. Okay,
Yes.
so basically, everything will be available, and you can.
we changed the ordinance that everything now must be submitted in digital format.
Okay.
Or you can buy me, you want to buy me a pad?
Well, just to be clear, the actual plans, so the site plans, are those going to be provided digitally?
I mean, we're going to scan them in, so part of why we're doing this is, and we're requiring that of the applicants as well, that they've submitted electronically, so that in perpetuity, or as long as we need to keep the record, we have a digital record of this. It'll also help marketing and staff with Oprah requests. They can now refer people to the web instead of having to send copies of that out when someone requests this via Oprah. It'll be available. You'll still get the paper copy so that you have both, essentially. But yeah, the full record of the agenda will be here. So if a large format is part of the agenda, then yes, it'll be here as well. But it will also be distributed to the board via paper.
Okay, but then but as we said, the large plans will be, and the large plans alone will be provided in hard copy in your boxes as they have been in the past.
Correct.
Be on my cell phone.
So you will have to log in to retrieve the board version of the agenda. If you do not log in, you will still get the public version. So if you are missing executive session documents or something that you feel should be there as a board member that shouldn't be there as a public, it's probably because you haven't logged in. This is usually the only issue that happens. The cookie expires and you forget to log back in. So always make sure, if you see login up here in the upper right-hand corner, that means you're not logged in. I'm going to go ahead and log in.
So each one of us will have our own password? to log in?
Each one of you, yeah. So your username is your first initial followed by your last name. I'm going to distribute to you guys at the end of this my business card, so you have it for contacting me if you need support. On the back of it is the default password. I don't want to disclose that right now for obvious reasons.
Obviously.
So on the back of it will be the default password, and it'll force you to change it to something of your choosing.
No, but for instance, if Mike wants to download, he'll have his own
Yep.
discrete.
Yep, and you know, over time, if the board changes, we'll, you know, deactivate board members and reactivate board members as they come and
The
go.
Lord
So.
can do that.
We're going to deactivate you there, Jim.
Well, I think the Lord may do that soon enough.
So once you're logged in, this is what you see. If you follow the link out of the email, it'll bring you directly to the meeting that is most current. This is a test agenda. This is not a real agenda, so just understand that this is what they will look like, very similar to the format that you're used to seeing. Up top, you'll see a number of links. Agenda is the PDF to just the outline. So it's no supporting documents, it's no staff reports, it's literally just the outline. So if for some reason you want that, you can click that, but the system generates it by default. Agenda packet is the full backup for the public. Whatever the public would typically get is in that packet. What you guys are concerned with is strictly the board agenda. Every single time, that's all you need to go to. If you click it, it will load a PDF of the board agenda, complete with backup, any supporting documents like this koala who's apparently applying for something.
Instead of moving on Hamilton Street, I heard.
He doesn't need any parking, Jim. See?
He's going to plant eucalyptus trees, I heard.
It will page number everything. It'll also, for any supporting documents, we'll put this watermark here to tell you which application goes with which supporting document, so that you don't get lost as you're scrolling through the agenda. And that's it. I mean, again, this is a test one, so this is not really a document, but that'll open the PDF. There's one other view, if you choose to use it, that's afforded in the system called Split View. I'm going to click into this just to show you briefly. It allows you during the meeting to follow along on a device of your choosing. If you choose to print this out and just bring your paper with you, so be it. That's fine with me. You print it on your own, that's fine. If you choose to bring a device with you and follow along, this view is probably the most helpful. It allows you to click live on to an item. It'll bring you to the item itself, and it also allows you to keep notes on the item. So ahead of time, if you're reviewing the agenda and you want to keep a few questions or notes for yourself, it will tag itself just like a sticky note to that agenda item, and then no matter where you are, if you view it again later, if you view it again at the meeting, those notes will come up for you. So again, it's very simple. Click on the item, you type your notes in here, you can go to the next item, it would come up, and then when I go back to the item, my notes are still there. So again, really simple system. I just kind of wanted to give you guys an introduction to it so that you understood. Yes, it is simple for me.
That's a primer to follow.
So what I'm going to do is a member of my staff is preparing a little cheat sheet for you guys, like a 2-page document. It's not going to be a whole lot. There is more that the system does, but again, I'm trying my best not to go too into detail for you guys, because really all you need to do is retrieve the agenda.
Hey, Justin, is it correct you're supplying 9 iPads for us?
At this time, no.
Just-
We want to put that in the council.
If,
budget request.
if you'd like to request it of council, please do so.
Absolutely.
Minutes will also be available via the system, so once the minutes are prepared, they will go in here. One of the advantages of this system is that the votes are recorded live at the meeting, so it does save you some back-end work for meeting minutes, and it also allows the public to see that summary that gets put out nearly in real time. So there are some advantages from a transparency standpoint, from a just an open government standpoint as well. But overall, again, just to kind of recap, if you see login, you're not logged in, please click it and log in. Once you are logged in, again, it's first initial, last name.
So this be ready to go come January? I mean, right. Our
So
board
it's,
meeting?
Mark can kind of comment a little bit better when they're ready to roll, but it is ready. You guys are all set up in the system now.
Yeah, that's the plan. The plan is to hopefully get this out for the meeting in January.
I can bring my computer and I'll start.
Yeah, just remember that the applications for maybe the first month, we won't have all the backup documentation because it's only as per last month, and like Giannato and Kay, his applications came in before all the stuff had to be in digital format. So you'll be able to use this, but it won't be until March or something where we'll have applications that were
Coming
required to give us
digital.
everything in digital format.
So the applicant has to supply you with that, right?
Yes, that we've changed the ordinance and we've notified the normal people who come all the time, so they're aware of it. And when we get the stuff and we do a completeness review and they're not in digital format, that'll be one of the things that'll have to be provided before it's complete and before we will schedule it.
So if you're in here and you're doing this and the Wi-Fi goes out, and say your cell phone, like mine, has a hotspot. you do-
Go for it.
All right.
Yeah, there's nothing to stop you from doing that.
So any network.
Yep. The other thing that this allows you to do is to review minutes anywhere, anytime. So if you want to review minutes prior to getting the meeting, they will be available here. This happens to be a council one, but and it also allows you to historically go back in time and see what you need to do from this screen. The one thing I'll kind of caution you all is now all three boards are in one spot, planning, zoning, and council. So if you need to just see planning board, just make sure you use this little drop down on the left-hand side, and it'll bring up the planning board schedule by itself. That's the only other feature that you really need to be aware of. Like I said, it's really a three-step process. You get the email, you click the link, you log in, and you click your agenda. Again, we will send you a cheat sheet with that, and I'll hand you out your default passwords and also the link to the website if you just want to go and kind of play around before you start getting those agendas. Feel free. But that's where we're headed. So,
Sounds good.
Any questions?
Yes.
I know what this is going to be.
I assume we have no choice in this.
Mr. Healy, do you want to comment on that?
He doesn't have a computer.
Well, I think we'll have to make appropriate accommodations if people don't have the technology to do this.
So,
And along with that, I have another question.
Sure.
Unlike the council, the planning board and the board of adjustment, it may be a conception that a lot of people have that we only deal with developers who have staffs and have, whereas the truth is we actually deal with ordinary, regular citizens of the township for whom putting this into a digital form may not be all that easy.
Yeah, Bob,
Or
for any of the little ones, we are gonna digitize them so like, especially like the zoning board, you come in for a hardship variance for a pool, we're not gonna require them to do that. We will take that information, scan it in for them.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not gonna make some poor little person's, spend an extra $5,000, with
and
some.
I believe the
that's not
ordinance was
fair.
written that way, so.
It was written that way, and it specifically says, basically, for applications prepared by, represented by attorneys and prepared by licensed professionals, something along those lines.
Okay.
For most of the applications that you see here, that's the case.
Yeah.
We don't have too many homeowners. So for the Reynolds Group and the, engineers and the Peter Lanforts, this is not an issue for them whatsoever. They have staff to do that.
So in terms of you yourself getting the materials,
Right.
you're not a internet person.
I'm not an internet person.
And we'll make the appropriate accommodations.
We'll put them on the first horse driving by.
Okay, very good, sounds good.
What we typically would do in those cases is when you get your large format, you'll be a paper copy waiting for you.
Okay.
So, it's,
Okay.
yeah, the last thing I want to say is, because I know this is a change for you guys, like I said, I'm handing out my business card, please use it. My staff and I, that's what we're here for. We're here to help you, so if you go in, you get stuck, my cell phone's on there, feel free to call me, I'll do my best to answer as quickly as I can. Do please, the first meeting that this comes out, try it a little in advance of the meeting, so that you give me a little bit of time to try to help you through it, because if all of you call me at once, I'm only going to be able to help you one at a time. So the only thing I'll ask is that you do try it well ahead of the meeting, so that we do have some time to work through it with you guys.
Would you make yourself available at the first meeting of the new year?
We always have somebody on call,
Oh, okay.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week,
Because
a
the reason
member.
I was wondering is, I'd like to do it, and so if we made a commitment that as many people on the board who want to do it, come and do it on that could be the day that if someone's on site, we don't have to call.
I would think, Mike, it would be important maybe to do that
Maybe
the first time we have an application that's in all digital format.
Yeah.
Because until that time, it's only going to be the agenda. It's really not much. Maybe in March, I think Lanford has a couple applications that are definitely going to come in probably in March. Summerfield's is going to be here, Canal Walk, and there's another one. When that's in there, we may ask
Yeah, no,
someone from,
that's actually a good idea, because otherwise you really just, not
Yeah.
much more than that.
yeah.
Yeah, and certainly it's easy enough, I'll just come to the
Yeah.
meeting, I mean, it's easy enough. And once the meeting gets rolling, we've done this with council, and obviously that's the practice we followed. By the first 10 minutes of the meeting, if everybody's in and everybody's good, then everybody's in and everybody's good. So, yeah, that won't be a problem. But I think Vince is right, we should do one.
Yeah,
That
wait
makes
till we
sense.
have an application that's in all digital format.
Sounds good.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
So we're done?
That's it. All right, so everyone, have a very happy holiday, a happy New Year, Merry Christmas, or whatever you celebrate. And try to be as all-inclusive and yet as brief as possible. And thank you for a very good year, a very enjoyable year as chair of the planning board, and look forward to a good 2015. Take some time and relax and enjoy the holiday.
Thank you very much, you too.
And motion to adjourn,
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.